Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me today for this webinar. My name is Lee, and I'm a Business Development Manager here at Argentum. Today, I will be talking about national incentives for funding your R&D project. So on our agenda for today, I'm going to briefly introduce national funding and its advantages. Then we will look at how intergovernmental funding is connected, looking at Eureka, and then go into deeper detail about national incentives that are available for European funding. I will finish by speaking a little about Argentum and our multi-submission strategy. So, there are many levels of national funding. I won't drill down into all the details, but the idea behind applying to national funding opportunities is to receive a quality stamp. So most companies that receive EU funding have also received national funding in the past. Each country has several sources for funding of R&D and innovation. Usually, one source leads this domain, but there are also different ministries that also prioritize funding for R&D. These sources provide funding for all stages of advancement, from early stage to commercialization. In Israel, for example, the IIA provides grants for seed, early stage companies, to more technical advancements, from piloting and clinical trials, and then the Ministry of Economy provides support for commercialization and export. In the UK, there are many sources of funding at a national level. And if you want to hear more about your own options, I'll be sharing a link to my Calendly at the end of the webinar. There are certain advantages of applying to national funding. The first being receiving this quality stamp also gives the company more visibility and recognition, which will in turn mean a higher chance of success when applying for more grants. Another reason for higher success rates is that although the funding rates might not be that high, the reason behind national funding is that the country is prepared to invest money in R&D and innovation. So they are willing to fund projects, and they also want to be part of it. So they can also be co-financed. The country sees the need and wants to develop innovation, so they are prepared to pay for such developments. They see it as a long-term plan for the country. Which leads me on to the last point here about it not being a one-time grant. The country gives long-term vision support. If they are investing in you, you can then invest in more grants. So here we can see some relatively new national funding opportunities from Switzerland, the Netherlands, and the UK. So despite Switzerland not being a part of the EU, there are a number of very attractive calls on Inner Swiss. Many calls have unlimited budgets, such as the Startup Innovation Project with an implementation partner. There are also calls for earlier stage companies, such as the Swiss Accelerator for 2.5 million Swiss francs and the Innovation Check for 15,000 Swiss francs. In addition to the national calls, the Swiss have several bilateral agreements with certain countries, such as Brazil, UK, and South Korea. And I'll speak more about bilateral calls on my next slide. As you can see, there are also several national funding opportunities for Dutch entities, such as the BMKB, whereby the Dutch Innovation Authority, RVO, funds up to 5 million euros for clinical activities and up to 10 million euros for technological activities related to the R&D of companies. In the UK, the SBRI is a branch of Innovate UK with a very generous budget of up to £15 million for all EU and EEA countries. They will always have around 10 calls open. And there is also the Wellcome Trust. This call is orientated for mental health. It offers £5 million for a 5-year project with a 100% funding rate. This call is open to all countries except China. So the previous calls I just mentioned bring me on to intergovernmental funding. As I mentioned, there are specific countries that offer this as an option, and there are also some open intergovernmental calls. The reasoning behind intergovernmental funding is that there are contracts between certain countries. They have very high success rates, and all of these grants come from the national funding body. For example, there is a call between Switzerland and the UK. Both are outside of Horizon Europe and therefore decided to better the companies through a collaboration of R&D project initiatives. The UK companies will be funded through Innovate UK and the Swiss from InnoSwiss. Sprint-D is a German national funding opportunity, but it is open to all European and associated countries, as is Welcome, which I mentioned on the previous slide. Some countries have national funding per region, like Belgium, who has funding for Wallonia, Brussels, and Flanders, which technically means that the two Belgian entities can apply for an intergovernmental call as long as they are from two different regions. Eureka is a large intergovernmental funding institution for research and development collaboration. Here you can see a report that they recently published with the division of number of project participants per country in 2022. The Netherlands had 152 projects participate, Germany 115, and Spain, Sweden, Denmark, and Switzerland between 70 to 80 participants. This tells us these countries have a relatively high national funding rate and encourage to apply for national funding. I can definitely see the difference when we work with companies with a stable national funding body, that they are able to apply to EU funding options much more easily, and also with those that have already received national funding in the past. Here is a glance at some of the Eureka programs. The calls are generally bottom-up or sector-orientated, bilateral R&D collaborations for SMEs, 2 yearly calls, and all of these have recurring deadlines with 1 or 2 cut-off dates per year. Along the year, Eureka program publishes its Eurostars for bottom-up bilateral collaboration between a long list of participating countries. But also bilateral calls between specific countries exist, and thematic calls within Eureka clusters. I'll speak a little about national incentives now. European funding, like Horizon Europe, is not just for the money, but for active participation of actively participating countries. So the budget comes from the country too. Therefore, each country has its own interest to see its local entities participate and succeed in such EU calls. As this isn't easy work to be part of EU calls, most countries provide incentives to ease the process and offer reimbursements for the cost of consultancy fees. The opportunity to apply for reimbursements is open to universities, research institutions, municipalities, and SMEs, and of course it can differ between each country. I'll now speak about a few. So those countries that offer reimbursements offer different amounts for certain participation projects. For example, BPI for France offers up to 25,000 euros as a coordinator of a consortium and up to 5,000 euros as a partner in a consortium. The Ministry of Higher Education in Science in Denmark offers various steps for reimbursement, which include a Eurostars reimbursement of 50,000 or 75,000 Danish krone, depending on whether you are the coordinator or not. In Israel, for example, the IIA offers different amounts for coordinators and participants for SMEs and large companies. So as a participant, companies are entitled to receive the incentive twice, and as a coordinator, up to 3 times. Vinnova in Sweden wants to strengthen Swedish players' opportunities to participate in Horizon Europe's calls for proposals in sustainable industry. They want to finance planning projects for Swedish actors so they can turn their project ideas into competitive applications for Horizon Europe's work programme, and therefore offer between up to 300,000 and 500,000 SEK, depending on the company's role. Business Finland offers financial support to prepare a project application for European grants for small, medium, and mid-cap sized companies. And the Research Council of Norway offers potential reimbursement for specific calls, of which the intergovernmental call of Eurostars is included. The reimbursement ranges from 5,000 to 50,000 euros, depending on the call applied to. Some countries offer different levels of reimbursements for different areas in the country. For example, Australia offers different amounts for Lower and Upper Austria, and Germany has a specific reimbursement amount for entities that are based in Saxony. So to summarize the national incentives, these specific national incentives, they exist to increase the participation of different industrial companies in the European Framework Programme by encouraging and assisting them to access the collaborative tracks, increasing the long-term involvement of these companies in European collaborative projects. Allow me to give you a very brief introduction to our company. Argentum specializes in EU research and innovation funding. The company was established in 1999 and since then has had vast experience and gained expertise in obtaining governmental funding for innovative technology and research and development. We have around 30 employees divided into 3 departments: business development, strategy, and a consulting and writing team. Our vision is to target innovative funding opportunities and to enhance participation and success in multinational research and innovation projects. As to our proposition, we know that the abundance of funding opportunities out there can become challenging to navigate because of the complexity that is part of the submission process, in addition to the many details and guidelines that every funding opportunity entails. We have developed a unique method to increase our clients' access to funding while minimizing their efforts. We call this our multi-submission strategy approach, which means that we target multiple calls, multiple funding sources to optimize our chances to be funded and to create a rational strategy of non-dilutive funding for the applicant. These grants and tenders can be considered as a source of revenue. They are usually competitive and demanding in terms of eligibility criteria, specific requirements, and so on. We become your partners to elaborate a project that is grantable, in line with the developments you have on your roadmap and in the scope of the calls we are targeting. Together with your project manager from Argentum, we will conceptualize and support proposal preparation until the final submission. Thanks to our methodology and professional experience, we aim to increase your success rates. You will benefit from our expertise, our workforce, and we will work with your technology and tailor it to fit multiple proposal calls. We have come to the end of this concise webinar with a short overview of what's out there for national funding. I hope that this was interesting for you and that it helped get inspiration for your next funding applications. Later on, our marketing team will send a follow-up email. You're welcome to book a call via the link that will be in the email. Alternatively, please feel free to reach out to me directly using the email you can see on the screen now. I look forward to hearing from you, and I thank you for your time today.